Hello CSAEers, it is Thursday, October the 12th, 2017, and this is the 17th episode of CSAE's Conquering Content. I am Stephen Trustrum, the manager of content here at CSAE, and today we're going to be talking about news as content. So what do I mean by news as content? What I mean is taking anything that is newsworthy about your organization and turning it into a content publication. Now, this may seem like common sense, like, well, if I've got news to say, of course I'm putting it on social media, of course I'm telling people, so it's already content. What do you need to know? Episode over. See you next time. No, what I mean when I say news as content, I'm talking about how to use it effectively in the context that we've already discussed in previous episodes of Conquering Content. So that means, not just taking your news, the things that you want to announce to your membership or to your audience, and going, here are the details, and just, that's it, everybody's informed. It's going beyond that. It's including things like the proper imagery, proper socialization, knowing when to publish it, getting the analytical data off of it, how to include SEO. It's all the things we've talked about so far wrapped up within your news. So how do you use news as content effectively? Well, first off, find a way to become regular with your news updates. Don't necessarily just post news updates when there's something big to say. If you've got an event coming up, for example, don't just say once, hey, this event is announced, and maybe put it in an email blast or socialize it every time you're asked to get an update on what your registration is like. Okay, so don't make it news when there's something pushing you to get that information, like a need to see the registration number go up. Keep the news updates regular. Let people know how registration is going. Let people know things about the speakers, whatever's going on at your event. That is news as well. So you don't necessarily have to think about putting everything into your initial news release. Okay, hold some back so that you can release more over time, and therefore keep a more regular news update schedule. This is important because every news item is an opportunity to create valuable content. Okay, and it starts, then you're creating a story around each news event that progresses. It's not just one thing, all the information at once, all the information reiterated, all the information reiterated again, and there's the event. It's a progression where people follow your news releases to see how things are developing. Okay, so you're telling a story with your news. It's also important that when you post your news updates, don't take the stuff that is already available, copy and paste it, and just put it into your email blast or socialize it or whatever. And this is something that happens at CSAE that I'm really digging into and trying to break people in the habit of. So for example, on CSAE, we have our events page, and this happens at national level and it happens at the network level. People put all the information on the events page saying, where is it at, when is it at, how much does it cost, who's going to be speaking, what benefits are you getting out of it, yada, yada, yada. So paragraph after paragraph of information. It's usually a full landing page. So then when the time comes to release an email blast about it, the information is taken off of that event page, copied, and pasted into the email blast. And the same goes, it's put into the news update, it's put into the socialization. It's just copy and paste, copy and paste. Don't do that. Don't repeat information that people can already find elsewhere. Otherwise, it's not a news update. It's a news repeat. And people don't pay attention to the same information over and over and over again. It just becomes noise. They want to hear something new. They want to learn something new. They want to know how things have been updated. That word is important. Update, meaning there's something new. So when you release a news update about something, say an event, or it could be a product, whatever, don't reiterate that information that people can find elsewhere. Like, you don't want to put in your email blast. They read the information, and then you send them through a link where they get the exact same information, but there's a registration link. My loose and dirty rule for news updates is, instead of copying and pasting, think about if you were asked to explain your event or your product or whatever to somebody who doesn't have access to that page, and you're not able to read that page to them. So you've just got to recite it to them all out of memory. What's the event about? Why would somebody want to attend? What are they getting out of it? Explain it briefly and concisely and in an interesting way. Just don't data dump on them, okay? And if you look at it that way, then your news updates are going to be content that engages. You know, it's more of a storytelling thing than just saying, you know, event name, time, place, blah, blah, blah. It's not boring. It's something that engages and pulls people back to that event page where they can then register, or that product page where they can get membership, or they can buy a book, whatever. Okay, so always keep your news updates fresh, interesting, and unique. And if you go back to the previous episodes of Conquering Content where I talked about your organization's identity, that also means going onto the different social media channels and the like, and talking about it in a way that is relevant through that output. So if you have Instagram, your news and updates should have custom graphics or photos, something that suits that media. And Twitter is really good for news updates, and for no other reason that the character limit really forces you to be economical with your news updates. You can't copy and paste off of your events page, your product page, or whatever, because there just isn't the space. So you've really got to think of a way to summarize it. So if you're having a hard time wrapping your head around how to get these news updates unique and just condensed, start off with Twitter. Go there first, because forcing you to condense it down into like a single statement with some hashtags and a link will really force you to get into the right frame of mind, where you can then go to Facebook, or you can go to your blog, or whatever you're releasing the news update through, and you can be a little bit more verbose, but because you've already condensed it, you know, you're already in the zone instead of just copying and pasting. So that would be my suggestion to you. Another thing is, remember to brand your news. Okay, don't just put the news out there and say, you know, expect that people will know about your organization, will know where to go and everything. Brand your images. When you talk about your events, it's your organization's events. It's not just the wine tasting and networking session. It's the blah, blah, blah organization's wine tasting and networking session. Brand it so as it gets shared, your organization's name is right there with whatever your news is. And it's right there at the front. Okay, don't assume that as it's getting shared, it's going out there, and that it's going to, people are just going to automatically know who this news belongs to. You also want to separate your news from other content. Don't blend them if you can help it. So for example, if you have a newsletter, you might want to say something briefly that's not news, like, you know, something about your organization, what you're doing, you know, what your current advocacy is, whatever, but keep it brief. You know, your news releases should be focused on your news. Don't mix your messages by start talking about other stuff and going, well, you know, news, blah, 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 news, blah, 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 blah. Okay, people are going to they're going to lose interest because, hey, I came here to get some updates and I'm getting all this other stuff. So stay focused. That's why they call it newsletters. Okay? So keep it all separate. And for example, that's why at CSAE.com, we actually have two blog rules. We have our blog, which is where we have the traditional articles, the topical stuff. People say, you know, 5 tips for this, you know, how to better engage your membership. That's where all that stuff resides, on our blog. But we have a second blog module on our website, which is just news and updates. There's no articles and topics like that nature. It's just, here's what's going on, here's what you need to know. So we can keep them separate. If you want news, you go to the news feed. If you want blogs, you go to the blog feed. They do not mix. If we want to, we can interlink. So if there's a story about, you know, say our conference coming up and how to, you know, boost conference attendance, then we might have an internal link to our newsfeed, so you can hop from one to the other if you choose. But you're not forced to, because, you know, here's one news item smushed in amongst a couple of blog articles. Okay, and the benefit of that is also a lot of blogs allow you to use RSS feeds and other things that you can pull the information out of your blog and, you know, output it elsewhere. So like I said, RSS feeds. So someone subscribing to your blog because they're interested in the articles, but they're not really interested in your news, they don't get hit with the news either. So you're not, you know, it's, to them it's spam, it's noise. And the same thing, if someone's not interested in reading your articles, but they really want to know what's going on with your organization, then they can follow your RSS feed, get that news, but without all the articles on, 6 ways to get a better CEO. Okay, so keep them separate if you really want to give your audience the focus that they are looking for. Also, a big part of this is also don't assume what your audience is going to be interested in. Okay, don't think that, well, this piece of news isn't really relevant to our audience, so I'm not going to announce it, or I'm not going to push it out to a particular channel. So again, using CSAE as an example, we have our networks across the country, and we have the national office where I reside. So what I've constantly been telling the networks is, don't assume that because some of your news items are related specifically to your network, that the national, wider audience across Canada and in the US and other countries, the international audience, don't assume they're not interested just because they're not in your local area. Some people like to see what's going on in different parts of Canada. They like to see what's going on with the memberships. They might not be able to access your event, for example, but they like to know what's going on. And if they see that, they might say, that's a really interesting event. I wish I could be there. Maybe I'll talk to my chapter and see if they can get, or my network, and see if they can get something in there. It's also important because it builds buzz. You never know who talks to who. So if somebody you wouldn't normally consider inside your regular audience sees your news item, they could pass it along to someone who is not your audience yet, but is in your area, and then you can get registrations for your event or whatever that way. So never assume that you're wasting your time by putting your news out through channels that are unexpected or are not immediately, do not immediately click with what you think to be a common sense output. Go for the expansion of your audience with your news. News, if you're outputting regularly, is a great way to expand your audience. It's a great way to expand your reach. So, as I was also saying earlier, because news content is a regular output, it's informative, but it's also an opportunity to increase your traffic because you can inject SEO into it, search engine optimization, keywords. So when you prepare your events description, when you prepare your product description, your membership description, have some thought into it about SEO. Think about keywords, as you should with anything that you're putting online. Now, this doesn't really matter when you're doing your email blasts and because email doesn't get scanned by search engines and doesn't get indexed. But anything that's going through an online news update feed, anything that's going through not all social media, but some social media channels allow indexing. So when you're doing that, think about what keyword phrases you should be using to increase the ability to index. Okay, so this is another opportunity to get regular content out to improve how often your organization shows up in search engines. And that in turn improves the chance of getting registrations and membership and audience expansion and all that. Okay, we've already discussed this. It's also a good opportunity to experiment with social media advertising, because a blog, if you have a link to a blog post on your social media feed, it doesn't really make sense to make an advertisement for it. Like, you're not really going to advertise, come read our blog article about the 6 ways to improve your CEO. It's not going to matter. So when you put out news items, things that are relevant to your organization, especially around specific dates like events or around specific products, then that news item in social media gives you an anchor for an ad beyond, say, an actual product posting itself. Beyond the whole, say if you've got a Shopify store or something like that attached to your Facebook, besides boosting that, then you can, producing it as news releases allows you new opportunities to create advertisements. So there's various aspects around creating content around news items to be considered. So the trick is, stop thinking about news as information. Start thinking about your organization's news as content. Okay, because all information can be content, but not all content is information. So news has to become content if you're going to make the most out of it, because you can include the information aspect, but go beyond it. But if you just think about your news as information, you lose all those other possibilities in the mix, and it just never reaches its full potential. Okay, so it's very, in a nutshell, that's how you can make your organization's news into content. This has been CSAE's Conquering Content, episode 17. I am Steve Trustrum, the CSAE Manager of Content. If you have any questions or comments, leave them wherever you find the video. If you'd like to suggest a topic, then also leave it in the comments or email me comments or ideas to Stephen with a V. That's Stephen@csae.com. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of Conquering Content.